Crossroads Community Church. We are so glad that you decided to check us out. You are invited to visit us in person at 9 or 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings. If you would like to partner with us in our mission to connect others with God, you can visit us on our website at www.crossroads.cc and click on the Online Giving tab. We hope you enjoy this sermon from our most recent service.
You guys can do it. Go ahead. Oh, so cute, man. I have, there's two neighbor girls that live right beside me. And we have been trying to get to know our neighbors. People just moved in right beside us. We have a side lot and across the little cul-de-sac street. They live right there. And there's two of the cutest girls, and they run around all the time, and I've been trying to get Nate to be like, hey, Nate, you need to go over there and give them some candy or something. And finally, just the other day, I almost showed the picture, but they might be here today, so I didn't want to do that. But Riley and Becca finally came over to our house, and now they won't leave our house. So they played, and this is the first day that they ever met, so Nate, Riley, and Becca. And then they were in my house. They were in the backyard. Then they were in my house. And this thought dawned on me, does your dad know that you're in my house? And she goes, uh-uh. I was like, will you just go talk to your dad real quick and say, is it okay to come to Mr. Paul's house with Nate upstairs? And they did that. And so it's been cool. It just reminds me about that. They're so sweet. They pick flowers for each other, all this weird stuff. It's really cool. But I'm a horrible neighbor. I'm like the worst neighbor ever. I've been in this area for 5 years, and we moved here from South Carolina, and I think my mic is super loud right now, but okay, is it great? Okay, awesome. All right, I just don't want to yell. Okay, I've been in this area for 5 years, and we moved from South Carolina where you kind of had to hike to go get to see your neighbor. It's like going to the neighbor's house, and you're just like, can I go over to the neighbor's house, and you have to come back. Now it's kind of like you can talk to your neighbor without actually leaving your house. You can just be like, hey, just talk to your neighbor, and we got rid of all of our South Carolina stuff. We were there for 8 years, and all of our lawn tractors and big stuff. In South Carolina, you have to have a truck, and you haul things, and you pick up wood for people and stuff, and it's just the way it is, okay? And when we moved here, we moved into a condo in the middle of Newport News at the village of Stony Run, right over by right in the middle, right there by the hub of kind of everything near Mary Immaculate Hospital. And we moved in there, and I remember thinking, wow, this is close. And I don't know about you, if you've moved into a neighborhood before, and if you're military, let me see your hand in here, all over the place. You guys are the pro movers, you're pros, and they have these moving companies. And when I came here, the church moved me with a moving company, and it's the first time in my life I'd ever been around United, truck lines or whatever it is. And I thought that the whole idea was that they were going to come to your house far away, and then they were going to move your stuff, and when you got to your new house, your stuff would be there. I thought that was the plan. And that didn't happen to us at all. And we had this, you guys laugh, it's oh, got him, yeah. All right, so I know you would know. I knew I was with family today. And when we get to the new house, which is a lot smaller, we don't know anybody. There's no neighborly thing happening. And we didn't have any furniture at all. And we had Nate was really small, and I remember all I wanted to do was just put Nate down. We had the little pack and play. It's all we had. We didn't have a crib or anything. It was on the truck, and the truck was, we came from South Carolina, and the truck was in Alabama or somewhere like that. So I was I wasn't quite sure how the truck got to there. So we didn't know when that was coming. So we just put Nate down in the pack and play, and the church gave us those really old rocking chairs, the wooden ones, And I remember sitting in Nate's would-be room with nothing on the walls and just a pack and play and a rocking chair that we borrowed, and we were rocking him, and then my neighbors started vacuuming. Like, not just vacuuming. I don't know how you vacuum in your house, but my neighbors would crank it up. I mean, they would just like turn the music like super loud. It's like, and it was like, and I was like, and I just remember sitting there just like rocking. It was like a two-person rocking because like I'm rocking, I remember, and Mary's over there going, you know. Needless to say, like, I never went upstairs and like had that moment where it's like, hey, I know you don't know me, but like I got a baby sleeping right downstairs, and I know this is like really clean time for you, and it's really great, and like you're releasing all this stress, but could you just like keep it down, please? Like I didn't know how to do that, so I kind of left that between me and my upstairs neighbor for a while, you know what I mean? And I found out that, you know, neighboring is just a lost art. Like I didn't know how to do that. Like I didn't know how to handle that conflict. Like, so as we've been thinking about this series, we've been talking to other people, and I'll have you guys raise your hands. How many guys feel like you're just like a top-notch, top 10 neighbor? Like you're a great neighbor? A few, okay? I think a lot of us are like, okay, and then was like, hey, I'm not bad. I'm not the worst neighbor. Like I've had, you know, does everybody know who the worst neighbor is? You know those people? Like you're not that person. And so like it's so funny that we're just kind of like, I'm not going to raise my hand. Like I'm a good neighbor, but I'm not the worst. You know, and it's awesome how we did this during our first time together this morning. It was the same thing. It was like, I'll admit that I'm a horrible neighbor. I don't know about you. You can kind of sit there and be like, I'm okay, but like I'm just not great. And it's weird because my parents' generation didn't really know anything about this. They told me these stories. We kind of watched a video about it just a second ago, how like neighbors would really love each other and hang out with each other and like support each other. And maybe if you're military, you guys really have a lot of that figured out, and we need to learn a lot from you about how you guys stick together sometimes, even when there's like language barriers in other countries and you guys are together, and that's great. But neighboring, being a good neighbor, well, we all admit together, is a lost art. Like we don't really know how to do that very well. Why is it that the things that are very close to us are the easiest things to ignore? Why is it easy to ignore what is so close to us? Things that get on our nerves, we just kind of like block out. The person who walks their dog at the same time every day and poops in our yard, like, we just kind of block it out. You know, just kind of let it, like, okay, let it go. It's just Sally down the street, and that dog can't quite make it to the next neighbor's yard. It has to come to my yard. There's a little bit of personal stuff going on there for me. I'll talk about it later, some counseling or something. But like, and sometimes, I mean, okay, let's get into it. Let's get into it then, okay? Talking about neighbors, like I just leave little baggies like laying in my side yard. I'm like, okay, suggestions, like a suggestion, like use that little baggie. Like it's laying there, it's free. Like if you forgot your baggie, obviously you forgot your baggie, because if you hadn't forgot your baggie, you would clean up the dog poop yourself, but you didn't clean up the dog poop yourself. Like you left it in my side yard, and I just put that baggie there so you could just possibly just look at the baggie and be like, oh, I should use the baggie that I brought with me. Even if you didn't bring a baggie with you, you could pick up the baggie that's on the ground. You could use that to pick up the poop, but you didn't do that. You just intentionally left your poop right beside the baggie. Do you want to start something? Like that's real life for me right now. And I have to think about, what am I supposed to do as a believer and a follower hard after Jesus Christ? Am I supposed to leave a sign in my yard like some of my other neighbors do that say, no pooping? And they have, I don't know, anybody in your neighborhood that has somebody in the yard that says, do not poop, okay? My neighborhood, sorry, this is going to be on YouTube and other places. I'm going to say poop a lot. My son's going to love it. But like my neighbor, God bless her, she down the way, she has a picture. No words, just a dog, it's metal, pooping. And Nate goes, what does that mean, Daddy? And I'm like, it means that only dogs can't poop here. And he said, what about other things? Can they poop here? And I was like, I don't know. She needs one. It's a squirrel, a raccoon, human. Like, she needs all that. But she doesn't. Anyway, I don't know how we got into that, but I'm just not a good neighbor sometimes. And maybe you are, and that's awesome. It's awesome for you. But maybe I'm not the best. I'm the busy neighbor that tends to be like, somebody wants to come over and talk. I'm like, I know you're really busy. And our neighborhood's a very busy neighborhood. We put out cones in our neighborhood so we don't hit each other's children, okay? like this sounds horrible. Like this, I thought about this, and they sell them at Lowe's, by the way. You can go to Lowe's and you get this cone that has a child on it, and it's like this. Like, I don't know if it's an already flattened child. I don't know. It's not like a 3D child. It's like, don't hit, and you can put them in your neighborhood, and it's funny that we're not worried about people from outside the neighborhood speeding through our neighborhood. That's not what we're talking about. We're literally talking about us being so busy that we don't see each other's kids. And we look at the thing and say, oh my goodness, Todd's kids are out playing. I should slow down. Like, that's literally what it is. There's these bus stop things that happened the other day where one of our neighbors like almost passed the bus my kid was getting off of. You know? And that's when I was really happy about, you bus drivers, they're your best friends. That bus driver was hanging out the window, cussing out my neighbor. Like she's like, don't you ever, don't. And so she stops, and we had this awkward moment. We're all like, okay, kids, let's get off the bus. There's going to be an altercation, earmuffs, this happening. And then in that neighborhood, you're walking later on in the evening time, and you see that white van that almost passed the bus, and you're like, oh, that's where she lives. Okay, so maybe that's just my neighborhood, not your neighborhood. But anyway, that's a little peek into my neighborhood world right now. But you might say, hey, man, I'm a teenager. I just live in a house next to some kids. Wherever my parents move me is where we go. You might say, hey, I have a great neighborhood situation. But what about the person who has the locker next to you, and you're so happy that your locker opens this way so you don't have to see their face ever. You just open the locker, and then you close the locker, and you walk this way. You don't have to look at their face ever. Or that person that's in the cubicle next to you that breathes really funny. And when they first started working there, it was okay that they breathed a little bit abnormally, but now you're really concerned about their health, and you're not going to say anything about that. You just throw mints over the thing, like you're like, try that, like might work for you, or whatever it is. Like, you're not going to go talk to them in the cubicle next to you. They're just going to kind of make suggestions over there. We all have people that park beside us, and there's this random dent in our car, and it's a white dent, and there's a white car because they park there every single day, and you have a white dent on your car now, and they have a white car, and something happened, but they don't want to talk about what happened, and you have to park beside them every single day, whether it's at school or work or whatever. And we have these people that just exist beside us all the time, and they're our neighbors. And so we realize that the art of getting along with those people is complicated. And it's something that we don't do super well. We have a couple goals or kind of themes you're going to see throughout this series, and we're really excited about launching it, called The Art of Neighboring. And you might see these things come up. What if these things happen? We've kind of been mulling over these questions. What if we obey Jesus when it comes to how we treat our neighbors? What if we just did that? What if we stop seeing our neighbors as strangers? What if? What if those strangers somehow became an acquaintance? Just an acquaintance. And what if we made a move? We made a move, some kind of move, to form some kind of relationship with them. What if we did that? What would happen? What's the potential in that? What if we just obeyed Jesus? What if we stopped seeing our neighbors as strangers? What if they somehow became acquaintances? And what if we made a move toward them in some kind of relationship? What would happen to our communities if all of us as Christ followers and people who just want to be better neighbors, even in the room, just started doing those things? What would happen? We've been kind of fascinated with that idea. And a few years ago, I got introduced to a book, and it's called The Art of Neighboring. We're going to give some copies of it away today. And I actually got to meet the authors at a conference, and one of the things they were talking about was just the movement that this started. And it all started by just going to the local mayor and saying, if you could wave a magic wand over this community, over the community that you're in charge of making better, like what would you do? And do you know what his answer was? I'd figure out a way to start a neighboring movement. I'd figure out a way to start a neighboring movement. If your people could just figure out a way to become better neighbors, I know crime would go down. I know kids who don't have homes would find homes. I know that people will be happier. Our economy would get better. These type things, like people will be happier in our communities. I know that would happen just by saying, how can I just change the way I'm living with people? And so we've been jumping into this book, and you'll see some themes from that come out through this series. But how not normal would it be for us in 2018 and moving into 2019 if we just did what Jesus said for us to do concerning our neighbors? Like, how not normal would it be for us to treat our neighbors the way that Jesus wants us to treat them? What if they didn't become strangers? They weren't strangers anymore. What if they became acquaintances, people we knew their names? And what if we had some kind of relationship with them? Wouldn't that be completely not normal, like, and strange? And that's one of our values here, is that we just don't want to be normal. We don't want you to live in communities the same way that everybody else lives in communities. We want to live in communities and be not normal in those communities. Matthew was a guy who was really close to Jesus, and he describes this situation that happened. We're going to be in Matthew 22 for a little while. Matthew 22 in verse 34, it says, "But when the Pharisees heard that he," meaning Jesus, "had silenced the Sadducees with his reply," and just give you a little bit of backstory here. The Pharisees and Sadducees, they weren't really, they were kind of like the Democrats and Republicans of the time. They didn't really get along about anything. They say the sky's blue, and they would say, well, not exactly blue, you know. So they didn't team up about much, but this Jesus fellow, they decided that they were really going to team up on this guy, and they were going to work together. And so they were firing questions at him, trying to publicly embarrass him. And they do this by asking him a bunch of like kind of nonsense questions. And one of the nonsense questions they ask him right before the question we're going to talk about is about marriage. And it's the guy's like, hey, if there's a guy, he's got like, there's 7 sisters, and one of them dies, and then the brother marries the next sister, and that one dies, and it's like you marry all the brothers and sisters, like which one of them will he be married to in heaven? Okay? And Jesus is like, you know nothing about the scriptures. That's what he says. Like, you know nothing about the scriptures, because people will be like the angels, and they won't be this marriage thing that you're trying to catch me in is not going to exist. You guys, you don't really know what's going on. Okay, and then this is what happens. Then they met together to question him again. One of them, an expert in the religious law, tried to trap him with this question. Teacher, you tell me, I'm submitting myself to you. You tell me, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Which one? What's the greatest commandment in the law? And I kind of think of this question as kind of like the question I hear sometimes, like, does this make me look fat? Does this make me look fat? How does this look? And you go, how do I answer this? Right? It's one of those questions where it's kind of like, is there an answer to this question? So they're asking me, of all the great things in the law that God, who you say is your father, has said, which one of them's best? What's the most important one? So you have to prioritize them, Jesus. Tell me. And Jesus says this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And to that they all said, bravo. Bravo, Jesus. Well played, well played. Way to get the first commandment down. Good job. Very good. Very good. We agree. You've done really well. And he says, wait, I'm not done. He goes down to the last commandment, which you can also find in Leviticus 19:18, and he promotes the last commandment up to up to the top. And he says this, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. The second is like it. So he says, okay, I'm going to rearrange some things. I'm going to take this thing that you all agree with, and I'm going to bring something up to the top, and I'm going to make it equal. Equal. At this time, the Jews were following some 614 laws. They started with 10, and they had merged to some 614 laws. And he said, I'm going to pass all these laws, and I'm going to bring this thing right up to the top right here, okay? And he says this, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments. And what's he mean by law and prophets? He meant every bit of scripture that you have, the law and all the things that the prophets have said, they hang on these two ideas. Loving God, loving your neighbor. They all hang on that. They hinge on it. They depend on it. And these are the two most important things. And those 614 things, I tried to find 614 things, and that's really hard. The only thing I could find was paper clips, and they would go from here all the way back there and around the corner, okay? 614 paper clips, okay? So just imagine there are 614 things, and Jesus is saying, I need you to put those 614 things down real quick, because I want to talk about two things. Loving God with everything you are and loving your neighbor as yourself. And needless to say that, it didn't really go very well. And you'll see next week what happens and how that kind of confuses people and causes them to think, what would happen if we just literally did just what Jesus said to do in these verses? What would happen if we just did what Jesus said do? Now, I don't want to talk about the 614 things and initiatives that you're trying to do in your community. I don't want to talk about the 614 things that are on your to-do list to make the world better. Because we all have them, right? We all have different opinions about that and which group should be able to do that and who does it better. And what if we just took these two ideas and we just tried to do these two things? What if we got to know our actual neighbors? What if we got to know our actual neighbors? And we are really great at trying to Christianize things. And we talk about Jerusalem, Judea, and the uttermost parts of the earth and things like that. Guys, those are just cities, okay? They're just cities. There's nothing super spiritual about that. It's literally like saying Yorktown, Newport News, and Nicaragua. It's even in their space and time, it was more like saying Yorktown, Newport News, Hampton, and Richmond. Or saying Hampton and North Carolina. We're not talking about super long distances here. And how have we gotten so far away from this community idea of loving our neighbor to the fact that I found out this week, and I did something about it last night, I didn't even have one of my neighbors as a friend of mine on Facebook. Think about your Facebook list. You say, well, I got Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so live there. I'm not talking about them. I have literally people who message me from India that I'm friends with on the other side of the world. And last night, I had to Facebook stalk my neighbor Todd. Hey, Todd. So I could get up here today and say that I have one friend on Facebook from my neighborhood. And by the way, it's not really that because it's kind of pending right now, so. It's complicated. What if we got to know our actual neighbors? By the way, getting to know our actual neighbors is going to be difficult. It's going to take effort. Newsflash, all your neighbors don't believe like you. They don't act like you, and they don't agree. All of them aren't your age. Some of them don't share a thing in common with you other than the fact that they are human and they live near you. It's the only thing that you share in common with those people. And I've heard people this week, I've talked to people about neighboring and being neighbors. And it's like, well, I live in a neighborhood, and like, I don't really, everyone's kind of not my age around there. And are they human? And are you human? Okay? If you share those things in common, some of you might say, well, you don't know my neighbor. But I have a question for you. Is being human enough of a reason to earn your attention? Is being just literally human enough to earn our attention? Just the humanity of another person living in humanity next to you, is that enough for us to notice? Because, by the way, is your life easy? No. You have money worries, so does your neighbor. You have marital issues, so does your neighbor. You have doubts and worries and fears, and many of us in this room know a God who says, give those to me. And your neighbors live in doubts, worries, and fears and may not know a God who they can give them to. But yet we live so close to them. Sometimes we can even hear them argue through the wall or from kitchen to kitchen. You ever hear those? Like in your neighborhood, and you're kind of like grilling out back in the backyard, and you hear like, Stephen, I told you. Don't be putting those dishes that way. Like whatever it is, you're like, okay. Should I go over? No. Stay here. Is being human reason enough? What are we going to be willing? Are we willing to lay aside anything for our neighbors? What are we willing to lay aside for our neighbors? Because there's going to have to be some kind of give and take, and we'll find out later on in this series about this give and take and how we can be better neighbors. But what are we willing? If Jesus was asking these teachers of the law to literally take their 614 hard-worked ways of living, like they found these laws and they said, this is how we're going to live, and they would tie them around their heads in like little pouches, and they would put them in their pockets, and they had flashcards, and they would memorize them. And to this day, many people continue to pray those at the Wailing Wall today. If Jesus said, I'm going to have to ask you to do something, could you take those and put those aside for a second? I just want you to focus on 2. Like if he did that, like what am I going to have to be asked to lay aside for my neighbor? And as I was going through this, I said, I kind of need a place to start. And I was like, this is a place where I'm personally going to start. And you might be able to start somewhere else. And you might be farther ahead of me. But this is maybe just an idea of a way to start. Like, would you lay aside this one idea that where you live is a gift that's only for you? That where you currently live is a gift that's only to you. How many of you guys and gals in here slide home like you're sliding from 3rd into home every day from work? You're just like, whoosh, whoosh, and then finally somebody's like, safe, and you're like, yes, I am home, snugly clothes, find me, like you get the snugly clothes, you get the snack, you get the routine, and you're just like, I'm done, I'm safe, it's over. No one can touch me here. No one can find me, right? The dog in the front yard, even if they do want to come out, he'll bark, and I can run to the back and hide. So like we have this like safe zone. What if we laid aside the idea that you saying, God, thank you so much for giving me an awesome community to live in. What if that's only for you? And you said, what if it could be for your neighbor too? What if laying aside the idea that this place where I live is a gift that's only for you, what if it could be for your neighbor too? That God put and placed you didn't place you. And I remember driving around looking for communities with my wife, and you've done the same thing with your husband or wife, and saying, where should we live? Like, we spent a year doing that. Because in this community, it's difficult. You don't really know where to live. Like, there's all different types of different communities. And so we did that, and I remember thinking, because I kind of had been run through this book, and I was like, man, God wants to place us somewhere on purpose. And it's been really cool to see as homes become available, us not saying, well, somebody's moving out of the neighborhood, rather saying, here's an opportunity to meet a new family. Who is God going to bring? Right now, a house across the street from me is vacant. And I'm super excited about what God's going to bring. And there's been a time in my life when I've been really nervous, but now I'm kind of like, what is God going to do? Who's he going to bring there? Because I know he's put me where he's put me on purpose. What if we could lay aside that one idea that where you live is just for you? Jesus is inviting us. There's a big invitation. He's kind of drawing us into this idea. Jesus is inviting us to be with people where they are. Jesus is inviting us to go with him, to be with people where they are. And what happens, we all know what happens when we accept the invitation to do good things, right? I mean, there's world peace, right? There's no more of those nasty, disgusting pieces of cereal in our Lucky Charms. They're all marshmallows. Like everything that's a problem in my life is going to go away when I start following. You guys hate that little cereal in there. Why just get rid of it? I don't know why it's there. Anyway, but like everything's going to be like sunshine and roses if I accept this invitation. But let's talk about what happens if we reject the invitation to do what God wants us to do. What if we reject it? What happens in our communities is isolation, number one. We isolate. There's like this neighbor versus this neighbor and this, that, and the other. Yesterday, I was at my yard sale booth, whatever you want to call it over there, and I met a local pastor, and she came up to me, and I never met her before, and in 30 seconds, she bashed another church. Right after she introduced herself to me. And I was like, I have been digging in this, and I'm like, that's just not what we are, man. I'm not gonna, and there's people that are my friends in neighboring churches. Like, I'm just not about that. Like, that's just not what we do, and I'm, not really gonna, oh, by the way, I gotta go help somebody. Are we so quick to always isolate? To always talk about our neighbors? To always talk about that person back there in our neighborhood who drives too fast or has the car that's too loud or whatever it is? Like, are we so quick? People that have their kids that kind of run around the neighborhood and not quite sure where they belong? Are we so quick? We're invited to be with people where they are. Isolation. They won't like me. Fear. In fact, they're weird and we probably should stay away from them. Has anybody background checked those people? Maybe I should look them up on like a watchdog site and see if they've committed any crimes, because they're just a little bit crazy. Actually, in fact, they won't like me, so I'm going to stay away from them. We should probably change our walking route in the evenings because those people are weird. Misunderstanding happens. Check out this picture as we start to wrap up a little bit. This picture is the story of many houses in our neighborhoods. And the first thing that comes into my mind when I see this picture is, man, who can I call to make sure they take care of that? Who can I call? Who does like car removal? Like, shouldn't they have a ticket for that? Like, I didn't know that you were allowed to do that. And that's like our first reaction. But the story of this picture is different. The story of this picture is a woman who's taking care of her elderly mother as she battles cancer in her last days. She lives across town, and that battle's been going on for 3 years. And she doesn't quite have enough help for the yard. And her second car has sat so long, it just has some dry rot in the wheels, and no one can really help her. She doesn't know anybody to really help her with that. And then there was a community organization that came over, and they tried to clean up. And they didn't really clean up. They didn't really help. They just put everything in bins. And now everything's in a bin, and she doesn't really know what to do with it, and she doesn't have enough time to do anything with it anyway because she's with her mom. See, that's the story of this picture. And I don't know what the story is of the house on your block, but I really have a suspicion that God's called us to it. And God might have put us in our neighborhood on purpose. Because we don't just live where we live where we've been placed. Misunderstanding. Jesus takes it to the next level in John 13. He says, don't just love your neighbor as yourself. Check out what he says. This is fast forwarding to Jesus' last time with his followers on earth, and he could say anything to these guys, right? He could say, save all the money you have and hide it, or invest it and gain lots of wealth, or take over towns and countries or whatever, or isolate yourselves from these other people. But this is what he says, and he's sitting there with these guys, and John 13:33 says, my children, he doesn't call them, my Jewish friends. He says, my family, I'll be with you only a little longer. You'll look for me. And just as I told the Jews, which by the way means that the group that he's talking to includes people that aren't Jews. Wait a second. A Jewish leader has people following him who aren't Jews, and he just called them children. What? Just as I told the Jews, so now I'll tell you, where I'm going you can't come. And he said in verse 34, a new command I give you. By the way, this was very provocative because in this day, who gave commands? Not Jesus. Commands came from Moses. Commands came from the law. Jesus says, a new command I give you. Love one another. By the way, this idea of one anothering, this term one another, is found 59 times in the New Testament alone. 59 times. That makes it right up there, the second most talked about idea in all of the New Testament, other than God's love for us. It's talked about more than heaven, all these other things that we glorify and say are really important. This is talked about more. Love one another. It doesn't say love your neighbor. It says literally love people that are right around you. He says, let's go to the next level. What level, Jesus? How much? What do you want me to spend? He says, as I have loved you. Not just as you love yourself, but as I have loved you. Love your neighbor. Love one another. So you must command, love one another. A new command I give you. Love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. What's the cost if we don't, Jesus? What if I don't? What if I don't love one another? By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples. And I want to go back and say it again. By this, everyone, that includes us, will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. And you say, why is it important for us to know who Jesus' disciples are? Why is it important for us to know? Because if the world doesn't know who the true followers of Jesus are, guess what? They're going to be lost and confused. Because it's our job as followers of Jesus, people that are close to him, to share the truth of the gospel with the world. And he said the reason, the credibility, your credibility is going to come from this, how you love each other. Your credibility is going to come from how you love each other. Not from what kind of house you live in or what kind of camel you drive or whatever it is. Like, it's the way that you treat each other, the way that you love each other. Wouldn't it be amazing for our neighbors to be kind of like skeptical about us, but for us to be brought really close to them by the way we love each other? They can be skeptical. They can still be skeptical of us, but to see something different in how we love each other and we love our neighbors, I think that would be kind of interesting, something we're going to be exploring in the next couple weeks. Here's the challenge. Be a part of the future. Be a part of the future. Does anybody know where Jesus is from? Someone say, where's he from? Bethlehem? Sort of. Nazareth? Where did he live before that? Heaven. Where's he now? Heaven. Jesus is from the future. That's where Jesus is from. He's from the future. He's a time traveler. Okay? This is really awesome. So he's from the future. And you know the things that really confused people in the Bible are things that they can't understand because they can't understand them because they happen in the future. Okay? And so Jesus is literally saying this, a new command I give you, love people the way I do in my neighborhood. A new command I give you, love people the way I do in my neighborhood, because when he looks out in his neighborhood, you know what he sees? All races, all colors, all worshiping around the throne. And you know what they're united around? They love God with all their heart, all their soul, all their mind, and they've overcome. And he sees that and he goes, man, I wish the earth could get that. I'm going to go live that out. And I'm going to call him to that mission. These two things, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, body, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And not just love your neighbor as yourself, love one another in the way that I've modeled it for you. And the worship band's going to be coming. Can I love people in my neighborhood the way that Jesus loves people in his neighborhood? That's the challenge. Maybe. Maybe not. We're going to be in this series together for a little while, and we're just fascinated with this idea of digging into this idea of what if we actually live this out in our communities? It could actually change how we do everything. It changes what becomes most important to us. And next week, Aaron's going to be talking about who is my neighbor. The next question that comes to Jesus is like, okay, well, you need to qualify that a little bit because, like, really, who is my neighbor? And he tells this spectacular story, a story that's been taken around the world, the story of the Good Samaritan. And he doesn't just say, well, you just need to love the people who live beside you. He says, let me tell you a story, and then you tell me who your neighbor is. And we really are really excited about getting to know your neighbors and also excited about getting to know our neighbors. We're going to be going around to all the different businesses, and you might work near here, but we're really excited about getting to know the names of every single employee that are around here. I mean, the lady who works at the pet store, you know, down the way that just opened up. And then maybe if I knew the name of her bird, that would help, you know. And what about people at Big Lots? And what about the people who work at Vinny's? And what about Starbucks that I'm there like more than I'm at my house? And like I know, you know, Elizabeth and Kate, different people like, but do they know me? Do they know that I want to be their neighbor? And so I'm going to be back in just a few minutes with some practical stuff, but this is our response time, and I don't know how, I never really know how to like lead into this, and the Holy Spirit's already been working in your heart, and maybe you'd say like, you know, that neighborhood that Jesus was talking about where he lives is kind of a place that, man, that sounds awesome. And we want you to go there. I mean, it's heaven, it's the kingdom. I mean, we can live that way now, but we're going to go to a place where there is no divide. And maybe you need to accept him today for the very first time. I'm not sure. Maybe there's something that's just heavy on your heart and it's been weighing you down all week, and just having somebody pray with you about that would make all the difference in the world. There's people standing around the room that want to help you do that and engage in with you. We don't like to cover things up. We want to live uncovered here. And so if that's you, just step out. There's people all around the room. I'll be at the front. Aaron's right up here. We're more than happy to pray with you. But we're gonna sing this song, and it's a little bit less traditional than usual. So we're gonna ask you guys to stand with us. And really, this is a series about action. Okay, actually doing things. So let this song speak to you.